Most of my research interests are focused on evidence that can be used in improving programs in the social sector, crime and justice, health, human services, and the like. And much of the work hinges on answering four basic questions. What's the nature and severity of the problem, and how do we know? What programs are deployed to address the problem? How well are they deployed? How do we know? What's the relative effectiveness? Do they work, or does it work? And then ultimately, my economic colleagues roll in with addressing the question, what are the cost-benefit ratios? The question of how well these things work, or whether they work at all, is probably the toughest one in the lot. One major contribution lies in the idea of designing and executing high-quality, randomized controlled trials to determine the effectiveness of programs. These trials are similar to ones that might be run in the pharmaceutical or medical sector to understand whether a drug works, whether it hurts or harms. Until relatively recently, the past decade or so, these controlled trials have been relatively rare in the social sector. One of my contributions has been to dedicate attention to the feasibility and appropriateness of such trials, the ethical considerations that have to be taken into account in deciding whether to run the trials, in understanding the extent to which one can run such trials. I've been involved in the development of the What Works Clearinghouse for the U.S. Department of Education. We are one of half a dozen other partners, including American Institutes for Research. That website is an important resource for practitioners, teachers, parents, if their interests lay in understanding which curriculum packages work in education, which dropout prevention programs work, which don't, what's the evidence for the contention that they work. How indeed, for example, are after-school programs run or designed so as to prevent school dropout? Why would one suppose that there's a relationship between the two, that dropout rates will be reduced as a consequence of after-school programs? Well, one theory suggests that assuring that kids stay engaged with one another and with school-related activity, often these after-school programs hinge on some of the same faculty, the staff being involved, in ways that are different than in-classroom behavior. The idea of assuring opportunity to learn in the after-school programs, that the engagement levels are high, is part of the ingredients for a theory that says after-school programs are going to affect the dropout rate. Whether that theory is true or not, whether that is another question. To test that hypothesis, people are running real controlled trials on after-school programs to understand what their relative effect is on the kids' attitudes, the engagement level in the classroom, or dropout. If it fails to prevent dropout, but does influence other aspects of the child's behavior and attitudes, one might still regard these after-school programs as valuable. And in fact, the William T. Grant Foundation has funded a fair amount of research, including controlled trials, to suggest that indeed it does have an effect on the kids, the parents as well as teachers. Not so much because there's an appreciable effect on dropout, because that connectedness is very weak, but on other aspects of behavior.